a wonderful actor, a writer, a comedian. Please give a warm welcome to Hannah Rockey.
Tonight, so thank you for having me. Just to share some facts with you, did you know that 1 in 4 people suffer from mental illness? 1 in 4, take a look around your row. If everybody else looks okay, it's probably time for medication, right? Yeah, depression. I'd ask people in the room who have depression to clap your hands, but you probably don't feel like it. I have what's called bipolar depression. It's tough, you're happy, you're sad, you're happy, you're sad. It's like you have the happy life of confetti. Oh, look at the glitter, look, it's all so pretty. Oh, God, I got a vacuum. And then I don't know if you've ever taken medication for a mental illness, but I got put on some medication for depression. I read that that may cause weight gain, lethargy, suicidal thoughts. I thought, hey, I've already taken this. And it takes almost 3 weeks for the average medication to kick in. 3 weeks! So I went to the hospital waiting for the medication to kick in so they could test my chemicals. I was getting bored. I'm in the room with a sheet pulled over my head going, woo, woo. The nurse comes in, she says, oh, Hannah, no, we are not a ghost. I said, duh, we're a lighthouse. Actually, my bipolar depression, it's not so much happy and sad, but at the extremes, I'm really racy. Racy thoughts, gotta get everything done and staying up for days, maybe irritable, and at the other side, just real tired and want to pull the blankets over my head and just sleep. And I bet, diagnosed with mental illness or not, I bet most of the people in this room have experienced those feelings at some time, right? You just want to hide away. And somebody told me that my mental illness, that I walk the line between madness and brilliance, which makes a really great artist. Yeah. Did you know that the father of jazz, I wrote it down so I can remember, Charles Buddy Bolden, the father of jazz, had schizophrenia. And he could not quiet his mind long enough to learn to read music. He could not keep it quiet long enough to play the same riff again and again. So every time he improved. And they say if he did not have schizophrenia, we would probably not have jazz today. Yeah. So I think there was a time that I was really proud to say, yeah, I'm bipolar, here's what it's like. But Warren said the stories that are hardest, we want to tell the stories that are hardest to tell. So this is the part that was tough for me. I went to the Ohio State University, the 2nd year of my Master of Fine Arts program, had a year and a half to go. And I decided to disclose to the board that I was bipolar so I could make up some B grades so I could have all A's. And, you know, and go back and say, this was a tough time, can I revisit that? And they said, fine, no problem. Less than 2 weeks later, I was pulled from the program. And the head of the department said she did not know that I was not violent, that she found me lacking aptitude and sophistication. All this after all that time. So she pulled me in a show that I was supposed to be in under the Royal Shakespeare Company. And I decided instead of staying at the school to accept that I would leave the program and come home and find another place to go. And I left there with my head held high thinking I'm doing the right thing. And you know, sometimes you feel that way and you stand up for something and then you get home and you go, oh, maybe that was the bad idea. And then I started thinking maybe she's right. Maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe I'm not this artist. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I can't do it. And the deeper and deeper I got under those covers and the deeper and deeper I fell away until I started remembering a time in my life that I learned what being crazy really meant. See, they say bipolar depression is often diagnosed in your mid-20s, and often it follows a tragic incident. Well, it was 1997, and I was in my 20s. I still am. in her mid-20s, and my sister had always suffered with depression, and she ultimately took her life. And I didn't know what to do. My family didn't know what to do. This was something we weren't used to. My family was a family of heroes, of strong people. We don't die. That's for the people on the news. We don't let people die. We're stronger than that. And here we were, having to unplug my sister from life support. It made no sense. My family fell apart, and my faith in God started to waver. And I was so mad at God, and I started to think, how can I forgive you, God? And once you're in a position to think you need to forgive God, you kind of have to pull back a little bit. Well, my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, or best friend, Dad's my best friend too, they decided that I should go into the hospital to get on some medication, to have some therapy. I'll admit it, they put me in the cracker box. All those names that we have for the hospital, and you get, or psychiatric ward, those things that we're afraid to say. And it is here. I walked in, and the hallways were white, and the doors were green, and it was clean, but it was a very, very old building. It was a state building. And I sat there in the hallway just trying to figure out, how can I get my sister to come back? How can this be possible? Maybe if I could figure it out, she'll be here again. And a man came shuffling by, an old man, a tall, thin, gaunt man. And I could smell him coming. And he had a frothy mouth, white and pasty. And I could barely make out what he was saying. And he walked by in his hospital gown, and of course the back was just a little bit open. I was distracted. But he was saying something like, the diamonds, she's got the diamonds. She's got the diamonds. She's got the diamonds. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in here with the fruitcakes. I really lost it. And then a woman yelled at me, hey you white witch, you son of a bitch. What's your name? It's Hannah. Hannah, you white witch son of a bitch. You dye my hair. You dye my hair. Her hair was platinum blonde from above her ears to her shoulders, but then her roots were solid black with a couple pieces of gray sticking out. And she had on red lipstick, bright like Betty Boop. But because of the heat in the place, it was dripping through the creases of her mouth, up and down. She says, Hannah, you son of a bitch. You dye my hair. I want to look like Pamela Anderson. And she had a cigarette in her hand and flip-flops on, and she was headed toward the patio. And she left behind her a trail of urine, which she flopped in her flip-flops and headed out. I decided I wasn't going to sit in the hallway anymore. So I went into the TV room. And there sat a beautiful girl, my age, blonde hair, big round cheeks, a smile on her face, a cage on her head. A cage on her head. Yeah, a big cage with some bolts on the side. And at first I thought she was watching TV, but as I watched, she was staring past the TV and very rarely blinked. Hi. Hi. I'm Stacy. Hi, Stacy, I'm Hannah. I noticed that she had a Bible on her lap and a nursing book underneath. And I remembered in the hallway, walking down, I saw a room with Bible passages all over the place and butterflies. And there were a lot of beautiful dresses, and I thought, I bet that's her room. I said, so, Stacy, how long have you been here? 7 years. What do you say? Oh, how long have you been here? Well, I had lost track of time. When you're trying trying to solve life's problems and fight with God and tell him how to run this place, you lose track of time. I said, I don't know. She said, 19 days. She answered for me. Yeah, huh? Oh, I said, excuse me, Stacy, I gotta go use the phone. Be careful. Okay. I went around the corner and I walked really quickly to the phone booth and I swung it open and I sat down. And all of a sudden my hand was wet and warm and smelled like ammonia. Damn it, Rosa! I told you to be careful, Stacy said. Well, I got up, changed my clothes, and I came back to make the phone call I was meaning to make. I called a priest. I said, I'm really struggling with God here. I don't know what I believe anymore, and I need some help. He said, don't worry, he'd be there in the morning. So 7 in the morning, I met him in the TV room. Stacy was already awake and dressed and sitting in the quiet. And the pastor came in, he talked with me for a while, and he put his hand on my knee. He said, don't you worry. Don't worry, Hannah. Your sister's burning in hell for her sin, but you can still save yourself. Well, needless to say, I was in the hospital a longer time. And one night, I was sleeping, and there was banging on my wall, since we didn't have doors. You know, it's a state hospital, they can't afford a lot. Doors are one thing they do without. And she banged. Anna! Anna, get up, you son of a bitch, white witch. You'll dye my hair. I sat up, I said, Rosa, don't you talk to me that way. You asked please. She said, Hannah, please. You son of a bitch, dye my hair. So I came out to help her, but I knew it'd be quite a task, and I needed to elicit Stacy's help. So I walked down the hall, but Stacy wasn't sleeping. She was standing in her room, just pacing, thinking, mulling things over. I said, Stacy, I need your help. I need help giving Rosa a bath. So Stacy and I walked down to the bathroom, and we got Rosa undressed, and we put her in the tub. But she kept sliding. She was like a fish. So I had to stand in back of her with my feet wedged under her butt, and Stacy got up the end and wedged her feet under her feet, and we proceeded to put in her hair dye and wash her. And I would lift one pendulous breast while Stacy would scrub, and then I'd lift the other side while Stacy was scrubbing. And we didn't have much privacy. There was no door. And I saw the old guy go by, talking about diamonds. Looked in, kept going. And I looked down and I was washing Rosa. I noticed she was burned. From about her breasts down, she looked like raw meat. And I asked her, Rosa, what's going here? What's going on? She said, yeah, I lived out there on the reservation, and the white witch son of a bitch has set my house on fire. They burned my kids. They burned my kids. Sometimes the questions you ask come back with some really loaded answers. And I determined from that that's why Rosa would pee everywhere. She didn't have the nerve control to contain herself. And she wanted her hair dyed like Pamela Anderson to go see her daughter. I said, why, Rosa? Why do you want to dye your hair like Pamela Anderson? She said, so I can be white to protect my family. I gotta keep living for the rest of my family. Hannah, you gotta do it too. She knew. She knew. Well, I looked out to the hallway, and here came the old man again, and he had a towel in his hands. And he came, stepped inside the bathroom with his back to us, and raised that little towel up so nobody could see in and see Rosa. The only thing is, he had his hospital gown on. Well, as time went on, I noticed Fred was getting a whole lot better. He didn't shuffle his feet, he picked them up. His mouth wasn't white and pasty. He actually sat down to me, and he smelled like mint. He had his hair combed, he had a dress shirt on, he had regular pants on. And I said, wow, Fred, what's up with you? He said, I'm ready to go. He said, I'm going back to work. I said, Fred, what do you do? He said, I'm a jeweler. I work with diamonds. I said, oh, I heard you talking about him. Well, it ends up that Fred is schizophrenic, and he quit taking his medication. And then he started hearing voices again. That part of his brain became active. And when the shops next door started hearing him argue with himself, they called the police, and the police brought him into the mental hospital. But they left his diamonds out on the counter. And a cleaning service was going to come in, and he was afraid that the woman from the cleaning service would take his diamonds. I said, oh, Fred. I said, well, how are you going to go on? What about your diamonds? He said, well, I have to accept that loss. He said, they're out there somewhere. And it made me think of my sister. I was learning so much from these people. Well, Stacy came in and she said goodbye to Fred. And I wondered, over 7 years, how many people did she say goodbye to? The average stay there is about 2.5 weeks. I said, Stacy, you know, how do you say goodbye to people? She said, I'll get out someday. She said, I lost my chance. They don't have much trust in me. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, when I came in, I had really bad depression, and I was here for 2 years, and no medication would work, and I couldn't take being sad anymore. So I told them, oh, this medication's working. And after months, the whole panel agreed that Stacy can come home to a halfway house. And they got her a bus ticket, and they got her a halfway house. And Stacy left. And she got off the bus on the way to the halfway house, and she bought a gun. And she bought ammunition. And she said she walked up to the halfway house with her suitcase ready to go, but didn't think she could take it anymore, and she pulled out the gun, and she shot herself through the head. She missed her cerebral cortex by a 1/16 of an inch. She went back to the emergency room, stayed in that hospital, and eventually wound up back where she was. And now she said, I think I'm ready to go. I don't think they trust me. And it was coming time for me to go. She said, honey, it's about time for you to go. I said, I don't know if I can make it, Stacy. She said, you can. You can. And you know, today, Stacy is married. She has a baby, and she's finished her nursing degree. And she said to me, she said, Hannah, I heard what that priest said to you that day. She said, I want to tell you, that's not true. That's not biblical. She said, besides, I didn't do anything your sister didn't do. I just missed. And she said, and I know God loves me. I said, so what keeps you alive? She said, God and bad aim. So I started thinking, I thought to myself, these people aren't crazy. For me to think they're unworthy or inept or Fruit Loops or incapable in any way. Now that is crazy. I'm going to read to you in closing. I just did this before I got here. This is a short list. This is just the top of a list of thousands of famous people who suffer mental illness, anywhere from OCD to schizophrenia to bipolar to depression. Vincent van Gogh, Robin Williams, Ben Stiller, Buzz Aldrin, Hans Christian Andersen, Tipper Gore, Terry Bradshaw, Jim Carrey, Charles Darwin, Charles Dickens, Emily Dickinson, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Tennessee Williams, Juilliard's Nathaniel Ayers, Abraham Lincoln, his wife Mary Todd Lincoln, Barbara Bush, David Beckham, Dick Clark, Charles Schultz from the Peanuts, Isaac Asimov, Johnny Depp, Oprah Winfrey, over 1 million of our war heroes and veterans, and this woman standing right in front of you. Thank you so much for letting me share.